Welcome to the Unlist. In this video, which has a bit of a clickbaity title, I guess, designers are dying, right? In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think designers are dying in the mainstream fragrance space, at least for us middle class and under folks, right? The rank and file people that make the world turn, as it were. But designers are effectively dying. And this has to do with previous videos I've made about the mainstream fragrance industry in the West. Not so much places like Asia, Southeast Asia, the Middle East. They have a whole different thing going on over there than we do in Europe, Western Europe, North America, which also includes Mexico and Canada. It's not all about the United States, but the traditional Western fragrance market, we are seeing designers basically dying in regards to them being accessible mainstream brands to begin with. That's why they're dying, because they're not going to be mainstream for much longer. So this has to do with some things I've mentioned in past videos about how the entire fragrance industry is headed for a collapse because it is concentrating further and further up market, to the point where it's going to suffer from what I call a heat death, which is a term that I actually borrowed from one of the theories about what could happen to our universe. You've probably heard this theory. The infinite expansion will stop at some point, and then it will reverse itself, and the entire universe will then condense back into an infinitely hot, infinitely small point. And then another Big Bang happens, and it starts all over again. Well, that's going to happen to the perfume industry. And it's happening because all of these brands are basically looking at the income gap, which, you know, not to be political, but the income gap is caused by the rich. It's caused by the corruption, by the greed, the corporate greed, the billionaires who are trying their hardest to become trillionaires and just suck all the value they can out of everything in sight and leave the rest of us crumbs, even though we work and break our backs for them. And then they want to automate us, replace us with robots and AI, and create some kind of weird, cringy, like dollar store version of Skynet. That's not going to work out real well for us either. But the point is, during this whole thing, you know, there's really not much of an actual middle. There's a middle class, but the middle class is really just the entry-level rich, right? Anyone who was considered middle class 20 years ago is poor now. Raise his hand, right? So these designers are going, well, we could continue to make fragrances and cosmetics and other entry-level luxury goods for this segment of the market. You know, we could cap our margins and we could keep prices the same, do what Arizona does with their 99-cent cans of iced tea. They just sell more on volume and less on individual margin. They could do that, and they'd still move bottles and make plenty of money. Don't get me wrong. They would definitely make money. But they wouldn't make as much money. They wouldn't make as much money. So instead, they reformulate, and where they can't reformulate, they discontinue. And then where they can't discontinue, they wipe the slate clean, and they start a whole new line all over again and just bump it up $200 higher. So now instead of being $85 to $120, it's now $275 to like $475, right? That's the new entry level. Like, all the new designers coming out are getting right around that $200 price point, and Tom Ford's already been at that price point for a while, and many other designer brands are axing their entire lines and relaunching them at these niche price points. And then I also mentioned in other videos how all these new brands are coming out, and they're all niche brands, and they're all luxury brands, and they all start at $275, $325, $400, and they're all targeting the same tiny, wealthy group of people. And how you can't have literally dozens of brands every year pumping out hundreds of new fragrances every year, targeting the same tiny 1% of the population. Like, on paper, in theory, it makes sense to follow the money up market, The people who can actually afford to buy luxury items and not think twice, not worry about paying a bill, not worry about filling their fridge full of food, not worrying about losing their place to live or their car, right? It makes sense on paper to chase that market and to go further up and remove the accessibility and just hike everything up, basically. It makes sense. They did that in the 17 and 1800s. The average person didn't have perfume back then, right? Like, the average person, if they were lucky, might have had a bottle of like 4711 or something, if they had anything. Typically, they just had nothing but a bar of soap and a prayer is all they had, right? They wanted to smell good. Bar of soap and a prayer. Maybe a flower in their hat or something. Best they could do. That's what you had for perfume if you were a peasant back then. But we're headed in that direction again. We're returning to that, basically. But the problem is we can't live like that now. Not with all of the access to everything, right? We can't live like that now. And that's why this industry is going to collapse, because all the brands are chasing a smaller and smaller. As their prices increase higher and higher, they're chasing a smaller and smaller and wealthier group of people. But in practice, this doesn't work, because even though that 1% of people has like more money than the other 99% combined, you're still talking about a very tiny number of individuals. Okay, we're talking millionaires, multimillionaires, and billionaires. The people who are going to just go, oh, $500? I don't care. Let's buy it. Let's buy 3 of them. Let's dump $2,000 into 4 bottles of perfume, right, in a little tiny bag. Spend as much money on perfume in a single trip as the average person would like spend on rent in a month and not even care. That's nothing. That's like chump change for them. But they fail to realize even those people with that kind of money to buy a $15,000 jacket or a $5,000 pair of shoes or a $500 bottle of perfume, right? A bottle of Creed at retail. They're not going to buy every new release that comes out in triplicate. They're not going to buy these dozens of new brands that emerge every year that pump out hundreds of fragrances. There's not enough of people in that income bracket who are that interested in perfume to buy all that. Like, the average millionaire, multimillionaire, billionaire is not a frag bro, is not a frag head, okay? That person might have a huge multi-million-dollar house, might have a 6-car garage, and like 2 of those cars are Lamborghinis or something, and 2 of them are Bentleys or whatever, and then 2 old vintage restored cars or whatever. It's typically rich folks have like 2 sports cars, 2 luxury cars, maybe a G-Wagon, and some old thing that they have. But that person is not going to have like a cabinet like this, but filled with luxury perfume. They're not going to do that because they typically don't care that much. You know, they're going to go into a Neiman's or a Bergdorf or a Harrods or whatever, or maybe even a Lucky Scent bar if they live in New York or somewhere, LA, Twisted Lily, and they're going to buy those expensive niche or high-end luxury designer brands one time. They're going to buy 1 or 2 bottles of that Creed, of that Parfum de Marly. They're going to buy 1 or 2 bottles of that Mind Games, of that new $400 whatever Frederick Malle. They're going to buy only a couple of those. And then they're probably not going to buy another bottle of perfume again for a year, right? Because they just don't care like that. They just don't care. Because at the end of the day, guys, at the end of the day, they're rich, but they're still average people in their tastes, in their consumption, right? They just buy higher end things than we do, but their consumption is still just about average, right? They're not going to sit there and walk into, you know, a store and go, I want 1 bottle of every new fragrance, you know, every new luxury, every $300, $400 bottle of fragrance. I want 1 of each of them, and then have just a gigantic cart full of. They're not doing that. The influencers probably do that because it's free. They get it free, right? The influencers do that. the people like Jen Sense and all that do the massive perfume hauls where they come on camera with 15 new bottles of perfume. But again, that's hobbyists, guys. That's YouTubers. Okay? That's not the normal person. Even the rich person is still not really someone who's going to do that. I mean, you might get lucky and you might have a millionaire with a fragrance hobby, right? You might find that one celebrity or something, or that one rich banker or lawyer or whoever that has a fragrance hobby, and then they will buy like one of every brand new Mind Games or whatever, or one of every Royal Crown perfume, or every Strange Love New York fragrance. They'll buy the whole thing. But my point is, the entire industry cannot survive on that person. Because even in that tiny group of, like I said, extremely wealthy people, that deep-pocketed collector is a minority within a minority, okay? Infinitesimally small group of people that have the millions to blow thousands weekly on perfume, okay? And amass like a vault of all luxury fragrances. That's like, finding that person is like getting struck by lightning twice. So the entire industry is running numbers and going, yeah, we got to make all of our fragrances $300. We got to make all of them $400. We got to make all of them exclusive. We got to make all of them Harrods only, Nordstrom only, Neiman Marcus only. We got to put them in brass caps, heavy bottles. We got to do the influencer shill thing. We got to make these expensive and exclusive and talk about natural materials and all that. And just, like I said, push everything up into this tiny little space. But there's not enough market up there. There's not enough actual market up there to sustain all of those brands. So 80-90% of them are going to end up flushing out into discounters. Companies are going to bankrupt, or some bigger company is going to buy them up thinking they're going to flip it. They're going to go try to BlackRock that shit, and it's not going to work. I mean, it worked for Creed, but Creed's Creed. BlackRock can't do the same thing with Strangelove, or do the same thing with, Fragrance Du Bois that it did with Creed, because the brand cachet is not there. I'm sorry if you're a fan of those houses. Okay, if you're a fan of stuff like that, that's fine. Raja Dove, all those guys, but you're not going to be able to flip Raja Dove the same way that you can flip Creed, because they had 50 years at it. From 1970 until now, they had 50 years at it. A lot of these brands have barely crossed over into 10 years, if that. They're very new. I mean, 20 years ago, Raja Dove was still doing stuff for Galan, right? So he wasn't even making perfume 20 years ago. So that's what I'm saying. Like, these brands can't be, not all of them are going to become an ROI. Not all of them. So again, the market cannot sustain. Now, getting to designers. Now that I've summarized that for you, why are designers dying? And, well, it's just because it's the same old thing we see with a lot of industries, where you have a bunch of brands that don't want to spend money, but they want to make money. So it's like this old cartoon where you see the dog holding a frisbee in its mouth, and it says throw frisbee, and then the guy tries to grab it and it says no take, only throw. And I make this joke all the time because it perfectly encapsulates a lot of big industries, including the automotive industry, including housing, including food production, with the shrinkflation on top of higher prices. And it also affects things that are not so important, like fragrances, like soaps, everything. It's where they don't want to spend money, but they want to rake in more money than they did the previous year, but they don't want to spend anything. So they're trying to operate in this la-la land where they sit back and go like this, and the profits just keep increasing end over end, bigger number every year, but they're not putting anything in. So it's literally like a parasitic situation where they're just taking more and more money out but they're offering less and less and less. And if they could, they would offer you nothing. They would just like give you a sticker. Let's say, here's our brand on a sticker. Put it on your forehead and call yourself a moron, and then pay us money, right? That's the point they've reached. And we're seeing it now with Perfume, particularly bad. It's really bad because you basically have all of these brands that are just shutting down and restarting at double, triple the price point. Van Cleef & Arpels did it. Estee Lauder basically wiped their whole slate clean and rebooted all their fragrances at $300 a pop. Fragrances that were 60 to 80 bucks are now selling for 4 to 5 times that at retail. Okay. Brands that started off there, that's one thing. I can kind of see, like, Tom Ford has always been expensive, right? So that's, again, but Caring Group recently decided they wanted to go down this path too. They're looking at Estee Lauder and saying, hey, we want to do that. Estee Lauder spun off all their designer brands. They got rid of them all. Outside of Tom Ford, obviously. But Zegna went away. Aramis went away. Tommy Hilfiger went away. Like, every designer brand they had, all gone. They spun them off, sold them off, closed down shop. Took all the Lauder brand perfumes way up market. Took Tom Ford up market. Frederic Malle up market. Joe Malone up market. All of it's $200-$300 bottles. Okay. Kering is trying to do the same thing. They have their own independent cosmetics division now, and they have Creed, and they have recently decided that they are going to reboot Balmain at a $300-$400 price point. Pierre Balmain, so brands like, you know, stuff like Avant Vert and Monsieur Balmain, which I don't think that one got re-released anyway. Balmain de Balmain, but all of the old Balmain fragrances like Ivoire and stuff like that, they're all going to be reformulated and re-released at these $400 price points. So we got Balmain at $400 price points. Bottega Veneta, all their fragrances are gone now. Same thing. Relaunched at $300-$400 a pop. And Gucci's license with Coty ends in 2027. So I'm going to start the clock right now. But now in 2024, you have until 2027, so you've got 3 more years to buy any Gucci Guilty perfume you want. You have 3 years to buy it. Because what's going to happen at the end of those 3 years? Kering gets the license back from Coty. All the Gucci fragrances all go away. And then they all get reintroduced, or whole new fragrances from the Gucci line. Maybe they'll keep the Alchemist's Garden range because that's the high-end range, and they'll get rid of all the regular stuff. So there won't be any more Guilty fragrances. There won't be Gucci Pour Homme anymore, or Made to Measure or whatever. Those will all be gone. And all you will have are those $300, $400 Guccis, and there won't be anything else. Okay? There won't be anything else. And Chanel has been very, very Creed-like with their price increases. The last 3 or 4 years, they have been tacking on $20 or $30 every year. So a bottle of Chanel that was like $85, $95, like in 2019, is now $150. If it was $115 because it was an eau de parfum, it's now like $180. So by next year, those eau de toilettes will be $180, and those eau de parfums will be $220, and the parfums will be like in that, again, $300, $400 range. It will reach the point where the exclusives are going to be here, and then all the signature fragrances like Coco and Egoist and Allure and all those Chants and all those ones, they're going to be right there. So they're going to all be the same $300, $400, no matter which one you get. There won't really be a difference between them, right? And you got a couple holdouts. I mean, you've got Dior, but even the new Sauvage is $185. the Sauvage Eau Forte. Meant to be a lighter and fresher fragrance, and it's $185. You know, Hermes fragrances, the H24 Herbes Vives, that was $185 too. The Chanel Super Allegra I bought, Super Leggera, I mean, same thing. That was $200. It's like designers are dying because if all these designer fragrances are going to be at this niche luxury price point, this $250, $300, if they all go that way, you know, Armani, Azzaro, Versace, you know, sort of all the other brands follow suit, same thing. Macy's is not going to have anything to sell, right? Sephora's not going to have anything to sell. Ulta's not going to have anything to sell because the kind of people that shop at those places aren't going to afford $300, $400 perfumes. They're not. People who shop at Macy's and cosmetic stores, okay, they're not going to spend $300, $400 on a perfume. So that means you're going to see this massive die-off, you know, and some fragrance licenses are just up in the air. Like Dunhill doesn't have a new licensee. Once the current one runs out with Interparfums, the brand dies. So I think we've got like another year or two left on that. And then there just won't be any Dunhill fragrances anymore. They'll just be gone. So that's what I'm saying, guys. Designers are dying. And pretty soon, you're going to see counters at places like Selfridges, places like Bon-Ton, and again, Macy's, JCPenney's if you can find one that's still open, you know, places like that, Bloomingdale's, Dillard's, Sephora, Ulta. They're going to have maybe a tiny perfume counter with a handful of those really expensive brands, the ones that they can somehow sell. But if all of the typical designers that you've grown up with, the Calvin Kleins, the Ralph Laurens, you know, all that stuff, if they're all going to sit at that $300, $400 price point eventually, that's it. That's the end. It's a wrap. There won't be perfume for the average person to buy anymore. And that's why I'm saying designers are kind of dying. So, and there's going to be a void to fill. And my prediction, if you've gotten to this far into the video, you've gotten to the end, my prediction for this is going to be all the Middle Eastern brands that so far have not made much penetration into brick and mortar stores in the West. So you've got little kiosks in malls that sometimes handle the Armaf stuff or the Versace stuff. But by and large, you go into these big chains and they don't carry anything like Armaf. They don't carry anything like Al Harriman. They don't mess with those brands. But if they're going to have this massive vacancy of counter space, they're going to want to put perfume of some kind in it. And they're not going to put Avon in it, clearly. They're not going to put drugstore fragrances because guess what? They all died 20 years ago. So designers are now dying the same way that drugstore fragrance is dying, and the market continues to push up into this little heat death thing I was telling you about. So that vacuum is going to be filled by somebody who's willing to make a $60 fragrance, an $80 fragrance, okay? You've got a couple of niche brands doing it, and I have to respect. A couple of niche brands are still putting out relatively affordable perfumes. One such brand I have a sample of here. It's this essential Parfums. This is a sample of Bois Imperial, and these guys retail about $90. So these guys retail at what designers were retailing at before the pandemic. So pre-pandemic retail prices is what these guys sell for. And they're considered a niche brand, right? It's a niche brand. But you can get it at pre-pandemic designer prices. So $80, $90 all day can get you anything from this line. And they're good perfumes. They're solid. I mean, Bois Imperial is very popular. Clearly, that one's like a hype fragrance, but this is one particular brand that might end up on counters in department stores. Others might be stuff like L'Occitane, because L'Occitane's individual stores aren't doing so great, so they may spin off and put their fragrances in counters of other stores. You know, that's always a possibility. You know, you could always see an increase in celebrity brands, but I don't really see too many celebrities putting out perfumes like that these days. You know, they also kind of came and went about 20 years ago too, so their day in the sun is past. But the Middle Eastern brands, I'm telling you, Armaf, Versace, Asghar Ali, okay, Al Haramain, Al Rahab, okay, all those guys, Latafa, they are poised to fill the fragrance counters of these mall stores, of these department stores, because once all the designers are gone, or like I said, are up in that $400 price point range, all the designers have sucked up into the heat death I was telling you about, there's still going to be an average Joe who makes anywhere from like $20 to $30 an hour, who rents an apartment, has a modest car or something. That person's going to still want to buy a perfume, that average Joe person. And he's not going to pay $300 for it. He might pay $60 for it, $80 for it at most. But he's not dropping $100 unless it's a really good brand, right? And all those brands that were $100 are now $400. See my point? So they're gone. So he'll pay $60 though if a salesperson talks him into a bottle of Armand, and someone, you know, comes up to the counter and is like, "Hey man," shows them this, and they're like, "Hey man, so I heard you like fresh fragrances. I heard you like aquatics. Smell this. This smells really good. Look at the bottle. It's nice and heavy. It's got this fake leather strap around it. It's got this metal cap. It's a very solid cap. It feels just like a niche brand. It's a real heavy cap. The bottle is not fragile. It's a big, heavy, well-built perfume. Has good performance. It doesn't smell cheap. It doesn't smell like some designer imposters thing. Even though it is technically a clone, it doesn't smell like a watered-down, crappy alcohol bomb. So it's designer quality. It effectively is designer quality. And it's like $40, $50. They will sell 20 of these at a Macy's, you know, at a JCPenney, at a Sephora. They will sell 20 of these at $40 to $60 before they sell one $400 bottle of Louis Vuitton to anybody. Okay, to anybody. It's just not happening. It's not happening, guys. So that's it. That's my discussion. Designers are dying, and eventually, once the heat death of the industry occurs, and all these brands end up, you know, suffering massive losses because they can't make margin on a tiny group of people. They need some volume. You know, there has to be a balance there somewhere. Then perhaps another Cody will come along like 100 years ago and kickstart the whole mainstream again, and we'll suddenly have perfumes in department stores. But until then, we're just watching this whole thing just, like I said, get sucked into this black hole, right? This black hole of greed and price gouging and consolidation. And these $300, $400 perfumes don't even smell good. A lot of them are just like a single material, like Akagala wood, Isoe Super, some big heavy dose of Damascenone and some fake aldehyde or something, you know, with a big glob of sugar in there. You know, they're all BR540 clones. They're all Delina clones. They're all trying to smell like Aventus or whatever. Like, that's just where it is. But they have Louis Vuitton's name on them, and they have Moncler's name on them. So it's like they're really just the same as the Armafs and the Versaces, but just with a 10 times higher price tag for no apparent reason other than the fact that it's got some designer's name on it. And it's just, like I said, it's not... You have to give somebody for their money. You have to give somebody something in return for their money. So And that's it. It's the no take, only throw. They just want you to pay them money because they exist. And more money in higher and higher up smaller concentration. I guess it's not tenable, right? It's ridiculous. It just doesn't work. It's just as bad as a lot of other industries we're seeing lately too. Like even video games. $800 PlayStation with no disc drive. Games that cost $70 and the servers get shut down in 6 months because not enough people play the game. So it's just saying, it's just a sign of the times. But this has been the On List.